Now here's the problem. The problem is when you guys hear the big crash is coming, you're going to assume prices are going to crash. They're not going to crash. Not like you think. Yes, if you take common sense economics, you would think if there's a crash, prices go down. That's not always true. Because if that was true, then the car market pricing would crash, and it hasn't. So if you go look, now are prices cheaper than they were at the peak of COVID when people were marking them up 25 grand over MSRP on a Denali truck? Yes, they are down significantly since the peak of COVID-19 lockdowns. But if you actually take a deeper look into every car manufacturer that's still in business, and I'm not talking about from a YouTuber or a Facebooker or a TikToker. If you actually go and do your own research and look at manufacturer MSRP, manufacturer suggested retail price, they are going up. So we're in a down market with cars, a down market with SUVs and trucks. Why are prices going up? Simple answer. They've shrunk their inventory down, laid off a bunch of people, found cheaper suppliers, cut their overhead down, raised their price, and now they're still making money. Dealerships have cut down their allocation of new vehicles that are coming in from the factory because they still have a lot of stuff on the lot that they can't sell, and they've supplemented it by going to the auction and selling a bunch of used cars, trucks, and SUVs. That's how car dealerships like AutoNation have been making money. They're not making money on new cars. They're making money on used cars. But yet the car manufacturers are not nearly selling as much, but yet their prices keep going up. They're not going down. The same thing will happen in the RV industry. So what's the difference? Why in 2008, 2009 were prices so heavily discounted? Well, that's a simple answer. And I'm going to go a little deeper than I normally do with this. I'm going to go one step further. Frankie, I love you, brother, but I got to use your dad as an example because he's the best example because your dad was kick-ass. Okay? Bob Baruti, God rest his soul, owned Giant RV in Southern California up until his death. Okay? When the crash happened, he had several companies that went out of business on his lot. Fleetwoods, Jazz Fifth Wheels, etc. When a company like Little Guy recently goes out of business, the bank that's supplying the loan for that piece of inventory immediately, most of the time, I'm saying 90% of the time, makes you pay it off. Now, there are some complicated ways to transfer flooring, but a lot of times when you transfer flooring, you still have to put money out of pocket. And that I'll save for another video because if I went into that, this would be a 2-hour-long bore fest, okay? So Bob had a bunch of inventory sitting on his lot that he owned in cash, that he took out loans on his real estate to pay so he could stay in business. So what do you think Bob wanted the sales force to do? Sell, sell, sell. We own that sucker. So you could buy a diesel motorhome for 60, 65 cents on the dollar of what was paid for at the manufacturer new. Now the downside is you got no warranty, so you're basically buying a used new diesel pusher or a motorhome. And a lot of times, dealerships like Altman's, who was right down the street from where I worked in Giant RV years ago, they went out of business because they were mainly a Safari dealer, and Safari went belly up, and he didn't have the cash to pay off the flooring, so the bank repossessed all the units and sold them at the auction for pennies on the dollar to try to recuperate from the 08-09 crash.